Welcome to Talkin Maine with the Bow Tie Boy. I'm Tom Saviello. I have my special guest today, Liz. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom.
You're so beautiful compared to these two ugly old guys on either side. And who are you?
Who?
Huh?
Scott Landry. Who are you?
Are you a congressman?
Pretty near.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
Pretty near.
But no, Scott, thanks for coming on. And Scott, as you know, sits as the chair of Fish and Wildlife Committee. So when I have you guys come in, I try to bring Scott in to be part of this conversation. So Liz, you chase bear all the time, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
You shoot them. Pictures of you.
I have.
So you're the fisheries biologist for this area, correct?
Yes, in the Rangeley Lakes region, yep.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Liz. You went to we started this off when I came in and said I almost went to Paul Smith. So you went to Paul Smith.
I did. So I actually grew up in upstate New York, not too far from Lake Ontario, right where the Salmon River dumps in. And I went to Paul Smith College for 4 years, got a bachelor's in fisheries and wildlife sciences. I concentrated in fisheries. And throughout college during the summer, I'd actually come up and intern with the state of Maine here in the Rangeley region. So I worked with Forrest Bonney and Dave Bushy, one of the previous predecessors. And then when I graduated, I was lucky enough to get a full-time job, and here I am.
And I knew both of those. I know Forrest and I knew Bushy very well. He was a good guy, really good guy. Really understood his business and very helpful about a lot of stuff. So you've taken his place.
I have, yep. Yeah, I'm very lucky to have gotten to work with both of them.
Yeah. So tell me, do we have any fish in this area?
Oh, there's a couple.
There's
a couple.
Couple suckers are here or there? Or
Yeah, suckers, bullheads, yeah. No, we're very lucky here in Western Maine.
So let's start off with the native trout population, because that's one that I remember when I was in the legislature and on the wildlife committee, we had defined some water bodies as A water bodies, which means that the brook trout produce themselves, never been stocked. And there were some that had never been stocked in 25 years, and then there became the rest of them. So how much of that population do we have in this area or in the state of Maine?
The Western Mountains is very fortunate. So that list, the AB list, has actually been combined into one list now. It's called the State Maine Heritage List. It includes brook trout and Arctic char, which we do have a couple here in this area.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, and so yeah, there's a lot. There's probably close to 100 right in this Western Mountain area.
100 fisheries.
100 different ponds. Yep.
Wow.
So it doesn't include lakes and streams, just ponds and lakes that have wild, self-sustaining populations that haven't been stocked ever or in 25 years.
That's right, because I forget when I was in the legislature the first year, that's been 16, 18, almost 20 years ago. So those 25-year lakes have moved beyond that 25-year window. Chandler Woodcock was involved in developing that criteria way back. And we had a big debate one time about splake getting into the fisheries, but splake are, let's go back to the native brook. Those are protected in the sense that you're fly fishing only in those ponds?
So they're protected by, you can't use bait in those waters, but not all of them are fly fishing only. You know, every water's managed a little differently, whether it's fly fishing only or artificial lures only, but it's fairly consistent that you can't use live bait, because one of the biggest concerns with a wild brook trout fishery is getting an invasive fish species. Really, to any native fish population is an invasive fish species, which isn't always necessarily a non-native to Maine. It could be another native fish population or fish species, but new to that water. So kind of changing that dynamic is never good. That's why we really encourage people, never dump their bait, never move fish around. So.
And that's pretty much how bass got into the state of Maine. If I understand it right, it was the railroads that brought bass up here from Massachusetts.
Yeah, bass seem to be, they're pretty popular in the state, throughout the state.
And they're not, people consider them a trash fish.
Some people do, and then some people really enjoy them. They certainly have a place in certain parts of the state. You know, southern Maine, they've created quite a fishery. And we have some populations here in western Maine, which have kind of, they're here now, and some people seem to have accepted them and fish for them. But still, we encourage people not to move them. You can't get rid of them, but please don't move them.
So Arctic char, what is Arctic char? Is it a trout, or is it in the same species, or is it its own species?
So yeah, Arctic char, they're in the char family. So we're very fortunate in the state of Maine. There's just over 10 populations. Most of them are endemic, so they've been here since the glaciers, and they're landlocked. So when people think of Arctic char, they think of the Canadian one that runs to the ocean. So these ones are landlocked, so they spend their whole life in the lake. And so in the Rangeley region, we actually have 2 populations.
Really?
And one of them was a translocation. So in an effort back in the 70s to create new waters, more char waters, we tried moving them around to create additional populations just because there's so few of them. And one of them actually took a long pond and 4 ponds at height of the land. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but there's a landlocked Arctic char population there. But it came from Flood's Pond, which is down east.
So did the Arctic char, in that case, when you reclaimed it, you killed everything in the pond and then put the char in, or did they?
Nope. So the pond only had brook trout in it at the time, and brook trout and char live very well together. They can't hybridize. They kind of use different parts of the lake, so they coexist well together. So they were just, the adults were translocated into that water, and they took. But char need very specific water quality and food habits, so they don't always take. That's why there's so few in the state, and they don't do well with competing species, but they do live well with brook trout.
So what would be a competing species for Arctic char?
Rainbow smelt, lake trout would be 2 big ones, and that's, a lot of that just goes down to they're both kind of inhabiting the same area and eating the same food, or it could be preying upon char themselves.
Oh, wow. So is there a depth requirement for the Arctic char?
So they really like cold, well-oxygenated water, so they need those waters with excellent water quality, which Maine has a lot of, but also we have a lot of other species in those lakes already, so that's why we don't have too many, so we really try to protect the ones we have.
So the other big fisheries one that we have is splake.
Yeah.
So tell me about splake.
Yeah, so they're a cross between brook trout and togue. They're a fast-growing fish. They're a little longer than brook trout. So brook trout on average live to be about 5 years, where lake trout can live for many decades. So they're kind of they're a cross. They're in between. They can live longer than a brook trout, but they grow fast and large like lake trout. So anglers really like them. Not sure if you've ever fished on places like Mount Blue or Lafkin. It can be a fast fishery. They're when the fish are biting, it can be fast. So
what I've been told is, since Mount Blue Pond we talked about,
Yep.
Now a special place in my heart, that they've just recently opened up to ice fishing.
yeah.
And that the action on there with splake is just unbelievable.
Yeah, so opening day this past year, I was actually ice fishing on Mount Blue Pond.
Okay.
Yes. And I had set one trap out, and I was about to set the second trap, and I turned around and I already had a flag and had a splake on. So it can be very fast fishing, and anglers really enjoy that.
Yeah, and then they say a lot of the kids really enjoy that because the action is phenomenal.
Oh, yes, kids love it. And they're
that's what it's about.
beautiful. They look a lot like brook trout, which is, I think,
Yeah.
one of the prettiest fish in the state. So
How do they eat?
they eat very similar. It all comes down to what they're eating. If a fish is eating fish, I personally don't think they taste very good, but and they'll eat other fish, but certainly they would eat, insects or anything. They're pretty advantageous.
And splake they don't reproduce, correct?
Correct.
Or they don't think they reproduce.
We've never documented it in the state of Maine. Yeah.
They're hybrid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing splake. I think I've seen a couple bass at the pond, right at
Yeah.
the shallow part, but it's
Yeah.
sandy right there, so they get probably getting ready to nest as best they can.
Yep. It's coming up. It's that time of year.
That was a good time to go bass fishing.
Yeah. It's a gorgeous pond. Yeah.
Oh, not that I would say it was gorgeous. It's a terrible pond.
Oh,
Nobody
yeah,
ever
don't
wants
go
it.
there.
You don't
Well, it used to be the water supply for Phillips at
Yeah,
one time.
yeah.
So, and because of that, there's no motorized boats allowed
Yeah.
on the pond, and so you don't have to paddle around, which makes it a challenge for some people.
Yeah.
And then the only real public access is the old water line.
Yep.
So, and I understand that's pretty mucky and muddy during some times of the year. So,
Yeah, it can be certainly around mud season. So.
yeah, but I'm okay. I don't need to worry about that. So, what about landlocked salmon? We've tremendous population in the Rangeley area.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We have some stock populations. Rangeley Lake we stock with salmon. There's some wild salmon there as well, but Moose Lick, McGunnock Lake, and Ziskahos Lake are all wild reproducing salmon populations. They're very abundant. We actually have a regulation to kind of assist that because there's so many, and really the reason for that is the tributaries. There's 2 very big tributaries on both those lakes that provide such great spawning and nursery habitat, and they're such big lakes with so much forage. They're just so abundant, which we encourage anglers to go out and harvest them.
Because you want
Yeah.
to keep the population in control.
Yeah, we want to keep it healthy because there's also brook trout, native brook trout in those populations as well. And so obviously they're, at times competing for food. So if salmon are overabundant and competing with trout, we try to keep both of them. And
Is the size of the salmon in those lakes
they're
where
smaller.
it should be? So you
Yeah.
need to fish them harder, like
Yep.
Sebago?
Yep. Yeah, we try to encourage harvest. So kind of in a sense, there's more food per fish.
Yeah.
Whereas Rangeley, we stock. We actually pay pretty close attention. We're there every fall trap netting, looking at the spawning population. We investigate the smelt population. We go out and we actually do kind of a smelt survey. We look at egg deposition in the spring. We go up and down the streams every spring, and we try to assess, was this a good smelt run, a bad smelt run? We saw a lot of wild fish this year. And so then we actually, every year, we look at the stocking rate of Rangeley and try to adjust it just right, because that lake in particular, we manage for a trophy salmon fishery. So a lot of times when you see the bigger salmon come from the Rangeley area, they came from Rangeley Lake itself.
Yeah. They used to really
Is smelt fishing still pretty popular? Dipping is still pretty popular?
So most of the Rangeley Lake chain itself is closed to smelting. We save all the smelt for the forage for trout and salmon. But there are places in the Rangeley area, like Aziscahoss, you can still smelt dip. And it is popular, but it does seem to be something that's kind of fading with time. There's still the people who, went out with their grandparents and really love it and try to get their kids into it.
Yeah.
But it does seem to be kind of a fading activity.
When I was young over in the Dexter area, we used to go over to Harmony Castle and Lake Wassaquag, and it was absolute insanity.
Chaos, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, the game wardens were hiding, and people were drunk and falling in the streams.
party time.
It was really a crazy
Yeah, it's
scene.
a nighttime fishing activity,
Yeah.
so it goes hand in hand. I guess.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us, Liz, what's a typical day for you? So let's say, a typical week. you
Yeah.
know, other than the fact that you have to really go fishing, and that's really tough duty.
It's
I saw
horrible.
pictures of that.
I'm all over. I think that's one of the things a lot of people don't understand is we kind of are jacks of all trades. One day I could be helping the hatchery crew hiking up Bigelow Mountain to the Horns Pond helping stock fry, and the next day I could be at Mount Blue Pond looking at access, trying to secure access. I mean, Maine's very fortunate. We have great access to a lot of these waters, but everything's always changing, and so fisheries biologists work really hard to make sure we can secure and maintain that access to these waters for the public. We manage all the stocking rates and regulations. So when you open the rule book, I should say this because I might get complaints, but you see the fishing regulations. And
Our phone number is.
Yeah. So a lot of that we go out and we collect, the fish, and we take samples and we analyze the data and look at, what's the use, and from there we propose new regulations, which can take, several years for a new regulation to become effective. So that's very time consuming as well.
Well, I found that when I was in the legislature, and it was interesting because I had groups that were very upset that they couldn't take more trout than they were allowed. And I began to realize in my mind there were two types of fishermen, meat fishermen and trophy fishermen. Meat fishermen just wanted it to eat.
Yep.
They didn't care about how big it was. If they got a string of 15 small trout, that was breakfast and dinner. I mean, that was great. And then
Most of them take the rest out.
And then the other guy, the big guy, they wanted to catch them and release. And then there was the debate between the Barnyard Hackle group, which I'm a member of, and the fly fishermen. And it was really interesting. I don't know how you guys dealt with it, but sometimes I got the feeling there was an eliteness by the fly fishermen, unintended, but that's what they were looked at upon.
Yeah, and I mean that's definitely one of the challenges is managing all these fisheries. So in the region that I work in, there's over 400 ponds and lakes, and then thousands of miles of stream. There's a lot, and there's a lot of different users, like you said, and users have different opinions of what the water should be managed for. So balancing that, it takes a lot. So we try to do a lot of public outreach. It's not uncommon to see us out on the lakes during ice fishing season, checking anglers, and at boat launches, checking anglers. So
Speaking of access, McIntyre Pond, is it over off the Roxy Rand Road in New Sharon? Are you familiar with that pond?
Oh yes, that's one where we have our eyes on.
There's been some, and that's been taken over by the Belgrade Highlands, right? That's been transferred to that region.
That property around
That property.
Yeah.
Now, access, we had quite an issue for a while there.
Mm-hmm.
People trying to drive in because there was a road that was owned by a gentleman who I believe passed away.
Yeah.
To get to that pond, people can't use the road. I understand they have to walk through the woods. If they want a canoe, they have to lug it through the woods.
Yeah, so the Great Pond Act, if it's over 10 acres, then the public has access to it. However, they cannot use a road if it's posted or anything, if it was a mowed lawn or something that's that's been, you know, improved. So they could walk through the woods. You can't be stopped from doing that to get to a great pond. However, it's quite a way to take a canoe. So a lot of people prefer to take, you know, a float tube.
Yeah.
So. Well, and that's, you know, that your point about that is that 10 acres, the Great Ponds Act says that I can drag my canoe across your property. I cannot use anything that's improved.
Right.
And that you can, but you can't leave your boat on my property.
Correct.
Like a lot of people like at the Phillips.
They like to leave.
They leave their boats. There's a whole line of boats there. You can't leave your boat on my property, but you can get to the shoreline. Like I have 600 feet. Somebody can drag their boat across, launch there, but they can't use the road that I use or the path that I beat down to the shoreline because I've improved that. And then it's 30. I didn't know this. We talked about this because an impoundment that's created by a dam, it's 30 acres.
Yeah.
So we had quite an argument with an individual who believed that somebody was restricting his use of this pond because it was 29 acres.
Yes.
So he had the ability to do that. But when you stock, does a stock pond have to have access, public access?
Yes.
Yes. So there has to be some way the public can get there. So because I had one of these arguments way back when about Day Mountain Pond. Is that somebody said it's stocked and there's no access. And I said, it's more than 10 acres, you have access. But does it have to be a public access or some method they can get there besides drawing across the property?
So we call it equitable access. So if the camp owners, you know, could put in a boat, but the public has to walk 10 miles in and use a float tube, that's not equitable. We wouldn't stock that. So it has to be equitable for everybody. These fish are public fish. It's a state water. It has to be equitable access for everybody for us to stock it.
So if I use Mount Blue Pond as an example, there's equitable access because it's the old Phillips water line way that people can bring their boats down and they can get in. Of course, there are only like 2 camps on the pond anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But
and it's no motorboat, so everyone's using the same
kind of equipment that's on there. That's interesting. So how do you decide what to put into a pond to stock it? And how do you decide the size that you're going to put into the pond?
Well, a lot goes into it. So usually, obviously, brook trouts, if we're going to stock, is kind of our first go-to because Maine has such a robust population of brook trout. You know, that's our native fish species. And so most of the waters at one point likely had brook trout. If they don't have them now, or we feel we need to supplement the population to help create a fishery and not put too much strain on the wild population. So typically, we stock brook trout. In the Rangeley region, we only stock brook trout, landlocked salmon, and splake. So a lot of times we look at what's in the drainage, you know, and what's around that water. So typically we go with brook trout. A lot of times we look at water quality. So with salmon, they need smelt. Does the population have smell? Is there adequate water quality? Salmon need, you know, really good water quality, great dissolved oxygen. So brook trout, they're pretty versatile. They can live in pretty adverse habitats, places you'd be surprised they can live, and we're pretty fortunate here in Maine. But as far as size, so there's different sizes. We could stock them as fry, which, you know, would be about yay big. And if we're doing that, there's not much in that pond because obviously as they're stocked as fry, they're very vulnerable to predation. So typically if we're stocking fry, there's not many of those waters. There's nothing else in that water except for trout.
Would you reclaim a pond to put fry in?
That has been done, yep. And then the next size up would be fall fingerlings. We put those in the fall, have them hold over, and they'd be there in the spring for a fishery. And kind of same thing, we'd be looking for a water body that doesn't have a lot of competing species. And then spring yearlings, you know, we stock those in the spring. We stock those for a lot of put and take fisheries, you know, near bridges, ponds near roads. They certainly can hold over for several years. And then fall yearlings, you know, they can be up to 12, sometimes 14 inches, depending on which hatchery. And typically we put those in waters that are ice fishing. You know, we provide them for the ice fishermen, but they do hold over as well.
What's the normal growth rate in a healthy pond of a brook trout?
It's so variable. You know, it's really hard to put a number on it. I mean, we have waters that a 5-year-old brook trout could be 8 inches, and then we have some ponds that a 2-year-old brook trout could be 8 inches. It really comes down to the water quality and the habitat that they have.
Now, you know, you used to have a fish hatchery in Toothaker Pond.
Yeah, yeah.
That was an interesting debate many years ago. But that was a brute hatchery. They kept the big mamas there, and,
Yeah.
and then they closed it down eventually. What about brown trout? Is brown trout stocked, and can it become a native trout? I mean, I know I've been told in Mount Blue Pond there are brown trout. Do they spawn in the pond, or are they
We've never documented brown trout spawning in Mount Blue Pond. We do stock a couple in there every few years, and the ice fishermen do catch them. Brown trout can grow big. Anglers like them. The key with brown trout is they're typically more active on those twilight hours, so like dusk and dawn. But they can grow big. They're originally from Europe, so the state does stock them. There's very few populations where they're self-sustained now, but actually up in the Orbiton, Reddington streams, there's some wild browns there in the stream. They don't get very big because they're stream dwelling, but in the lakes, in the Rangeley area, we have a few brown trout fisheries, but we haven't documented any of them reproducing in the lakes. Yeah,
a pretty good fishery in Weld, I believe, of brown trout.
Yep. People enjoy that.
Yeah.
They can take a warmer temperature too, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Because I remember back when I was at the mill, they wanted us to stock brown trout in the Androscoggin River. And I said, why are you going to want us to? But they absolutely insisted that we do this. So we did it. And we had to go down there and watch them all go in. And I watched them all go down the river. But we had to send somebody out every day. And when the anglers came off, we did a survey. Did you catch any brown trout? No. And so when I got to the second year of trying, I said, guys, they're just going down the river. No, you still got to put them in. So we put them back in again. At the third year, they told us to stop.
Yeah. So yeah, we do a lot of creel surveys.
You do creel? I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, it's pretty. That's one of the big tools we have. We go out. One, it's a great way to interact with the anglers. Two, we figure out what are they catching? Are they keeping fish? And especially on stock fisheries, that's really important to know. Are people catching them? And then are they keeping them? So that helps us with how many fish to put in. If everyone's just releasing them, then that's different than if everyone's walking off the lake or pond.
So I'll tell you my fish story. Yeah. So I used to spend a lot of time up in the Telos area. I was working on my PhD project and so forth. And Ripagina Stream came right through our plots. And so we would fish there. And we eventually found about a mile from the road this deep hole. The water would come in and it would turn left. It was really deep. And we could go there any day pretty much with barnyard hackles and get 3 or 4 trout out of it. So we were up there one night with a big meeting, and the people that were at the meeting fed us lobster. And one of the guys wanted to go fishing, and I said, well, you don't have a license, but I know a place that's a mile away. We'll go see if we can find it. But we had no bait, other than old lobster claws that had been left. Nobody had eaten the meat out of them.
Oh, my goodness.
So I'd heard this rumor that years ago, my advisor said that we used to buy lobster, because it used to sell for 39 cents a pound, as fish bait. So I said, well, I heard this story. So we went back into the spot. We were there half an hour and caught 15 trout. The lobster didn't hit the water, but something grabbed them. They were all little 6 to 8 inches. Boy, they were good breakfast trout.
Well, they've been eating lobster. Of course they were yummy.
Yeah, they didn't eat it very much, but I tell you, I've never seen anything like that. What hit it, boom, they slapped that water. And came
That's funny.
And that was without a license?
No, I had a license. I had a license. Somebody else, I don't know whether he really fished or not. He may have just gone on the hike.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So what's your favorite fishing story?
Oh, my favorite fishing story? I have so many. I don't know. So I was really fortunate. I grew up, I spent a lot of time fishing growing up. My family, every time we went on vacation, we'd only go on vacation really to target a fish species.
Really? Wow.
So yeah, I've been fishing. I've been very lucky fishing all around.
All right, so I'll help you. What's the biggest fish you've caught?
Let's see. Well, I've been to Alaska, so I've caught a kingfish, but I also grew up near Lake Ontario and fished the Salmon River. I mean, my brother and I would get out of school and we'd just beg my dad, take us down to the river, take us down to the river. And so we'd be out there fishing for, kings and cohos coming up from Lake Ontario. So similar sizes to Alaska, really. But, and then I love to deep sea fish. So obviously some pretty big fish in the ocean.
Yeah.
Speaking of licenses, do your kids all have lifetime hunting and fishing license?
They do.
That's something every child should be.
They should. So my parents actually, when my kids were born, before they turned 5, bought all their lifetime licenses in the state of Maine. They're still in New York, and they can't believe, they think it's the best deal. And they can't believe not everybody's doing that. So
I buy them from my grandchildren.
yeah,
I got them because I'm old. All right, it might cost $35, but now it's a lifetime license, so it's good to have when I'm old.
Yeah.
So where would I go fishing? Where do you think I should go fishing in Franklin County?
In Franklin County, well, if you have knowing where your camp is, I mean, Malibu Pond's a great area, but so I don't live too far from you, and so I really enjoy going up to Day Mountain Pond. That's a wild self-sustaining population. That's a great fishery in the evening. And then if I want to take the kids, I skip over to Schoolhouse Pond, which is a stocked fishery. But the pictures you were referring to is on Pierce Pond. That's one of my favorite waters to fish.
Pierce Pond, so everybody knows, on Facebook, she was working really hard catching these trout. They were about this big. And Mark Lady was there, so there's a big smile on his face. He was probably doing public relations communications with the fish.
Maybe. No, we were just fishing. Yeah. But no, really, there's so many wonderful places to fish. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk to any angler about places to fish. And it's pretty frequent. It's not every day, but almost every day I get a call or an email. Someone's in the area or wants to know more about a fishery or where could I go fishing. You know, I'm in Eustis for a wedding. Where should I go? And it's pretty common.
So you won't see this, but right now Andre will be running the phone number you give to him right underneath here so they know who to call. What about Flagstaff? What's in Flagstaff? Is it just bass or?
There shouldn't be any bass in there. Have you caught a bass?
No.
Okay.
I was just thinking it's shallow and warm.
It is. So it's because it's an impoundment. It's very shallow, warm. There's not great oxygen, obviously. So it's really hard for trout and salmon there. But the old lake, the old Flagstaff Lake. Yeah. So we stock a few salmon in there, and people do catch them. They really hold on to kind of that old Flagstaff pond. And then if you look at the old maps, you can see where the river goes through.
So it'll be deeper in that spot.
Right. And then a lot of the incoming, the south branch and the north branch of the dead, those are stocked with brook trout. And so Flagstaff Lake is just really hard because it's an impoundment, it's shallow, it doesn't have great water quality. Yeah. So it has pickerel. It has pickerel and perch. That would probably be the biggest fishery.
That's probably the biggest fish I ever caught was a pickerel about that long. And then the other famous one is northern pike. How bad is that in Franklin County as we get ready to end the show?
Well, thankfully, we don't have, we only have one population, and it came up, from southern Maine, it's kind of creeping its way up. But certainly that is a concern, and we hope to not get any more northern pike populations.
I mean, I've been up to Baker Lake up at the St. John, where the pike has come in from Canada and done a pretty damaging to the population up there.
Yeah.
I remember when it was a shock when some anglers stocked moosehead with white perch. That was back in the 70s.
Yeah.
An illegal stocking, and people were quite upset.
So Liz, we this August maybe we'll come out and take us on a fishing trip. Or show us some of the things you do. Maybe we'll go to Mount Blue Pond and do some work there. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
I know where we can stay, or I know where we can sit, and you can go out and fish. I don't, because I'm right at that point where I think right off my end is right by the fish landing, boat landing is 38 feet deep.
Wow.
So I think that's right. So, but anyway, Liz, thank you. This is
Yeah,
great. This is
great.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Scotty, thanks for coming on the show.
Always
Appreciate
a pleasure.
Next week we'll have the big boss coming on. Judy's coming on.
Perfect.
So we'll harass her.
Well, I'm glad I went before. I don't want to go after her.
You did great, Liz. You're great. So this is Tom Saviello for Talkin Maine. Liz Thorndike, that was phenomenal. Thank you, and look forward to our little fishing visit this August sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.